Hey there, and welcome to the CMMC Compliance Guide podcast. I'm Austin.
And I'm Brooke.
From Justice IT Consulting, where we help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're hired guns getting companies fast-tracked to compliance, but today we're here to give you all the secrets for free, so if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Today, we're going to talk about something near and dear to every manufacturer's heart, documentation and paperwork.
I'm sure. I have no doubt.
Yes, just kidding. No, not near and dear. It's typically what we hear from manufacturers as the one thing that they don't have figured out or don't like. It's typically, people running lean teams, maybe an IT guy, an ops manager, or a quality guy, wearing multiple hats, as they always do, and probably have a binder or folder on your desktop somewhere that's old, dusty, with a bunch of templates that you haven't visited in a while.
Right, exactly.
So if that's you. Today, we're going to be talking about policies and paperwork, so get ready. So, Brooke, let's start with the obvious question. Why do small and mid-sized manufacturers and machine shops end up drowning in paperwork that doesn't even seem to match their day-to-day operations and what they actually do?
It's a good question. I have no clue why. No, I'm just kidding. That's a problem with that a lot of folks have with CMMC, especially if they've tried to do it themselves, and downloaded a bunch of templates and all that kind of fun stuff. But really, where it really comes from is that most of the defense industrial base is not huge Lockheed Martin, Bell, and Raytheon type companies. Most of them are going to be small businesses, and those small businesses and even some medium sized businesses. So they don't necessarily have the CISO, the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. They possibly might have a CIO, Chief Information Officer. Typically, they're small teams. If at all, a lot of our clients, for instance, we are their team. They don't have a team, so we're their IT team. So we're their CISO, CIO, we're their help desk, and everything else. So, but there's a lot that don't have that, and so to be able to download a few templates and put them in place and think they address CMMC, that's a tough one. They're busy doing what they're supposed to be doing, run those CNC machines, managing other employees, doing the business of business, instead of creating documents and templates and policies and all that kind of fun stuff. That's not necessarily their forte, and their forte generally is not information technology either. So I will say that most of this is not most of CMMC is not about the tech. It's about paperwork, people and process, documentation. Make sure you're doing what you say you're doing, but it is about protecting that information, and that is a large amount of that part is tech. So, but there's template overload. You can go to any number of places and download templates for CMMC. That's great. That'll get you started. You got to kind of understand what it means. that would go a long way to help it. So people start out with all these templates, and they really don't address the way they're doing business. They don't really understand what they're supposed to write. They may be overly broad or not specific enough to address their environment. And when you're downloading all those policy documents, trying to figure things out, Raytheon and Lockheed and them may need a huge set of policy documents, split out all sorts of fun stuff to get it all covered properly and make sure it's understandable and everything. But with smaller businesses, you can coalesce a lot of those policies you would normally split out with a larger company. You could make those into one policy. For instance, there's have a policy for each of the 14 families, of controls, and then have some policies or procedures and some plans to go along with that to cover the other things you need, and that'll go a long way towards fulfilling what you need for your small business. You don't necessarily need to split out, every single role or anything. So, another thing is there's no one person necessarily that owns these policies to keep them updated, to make sure that they address everything that's supposed to be addressed for that small business. They may assign the quality guy to do all this, but the quality guy goes, yeah, here's some templates, but who's supposed to really keep those up to date? Who's supposed to do anything with those? So
typically there's either not a champion for compliance and all the paperwork, or there has been one designated, but they're highly under-resourced.
and a lot of times when there's a champion, the owner or the CEO or whoever says, hey, little Johnny here, quality guy, I need you to implement CMMC for us. And so little Johnny goes and talks to the CNC operators and says, we got to do this. And they're like, yeah, thanks. We're not doing that, So it really needs to have champions that and somebody, it needs to have high level buy-in and high level push to get everything done. So a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times it's the quality guy, the IT guy, and everybody else says, you're telling me we got to do what? And again, I've addressed this one. The note that I have written down is that the policies don't actually address the way you work. I've talked about that already, but you've got to understand the way people work, the way all of your team works. For instance, typically we'll bring in not just the executives, but we'll bring in other, managers and team members, or ask them to bring them in, and we'll have those policy meetings with everybody. And typically, what you find is, the IT guy or the CEO or somebody says, yeah, this is the way we do it. And, the guy over here who actually does it says, well, actually, this is the way it really works. And so you find a lot of good detail out that way, making sure you involve the people that actually do the work or the people that directly manage those people, right?
Yeah, a good way to fail your assessment is to make a bunch of assumptions.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, assumptions are not good. So, and then when people want us to put this documentation together, that we can do all that for you, but it's really not for you. It's with you and along with guiding you through it, helping you understand everything and putting it together for you. So it's not you can't just say, go put this together and give it to me. You have to understand the business, and there's not one single person that does understand the whole business. So you put all those problems together and you get, unnecessarily complex policies or too broad policies that are too broad, to address everything the way they should be addressed. So that's those are real problems within small companies.
Yeah, typically when we work with a company, they either don't have documentation or they do have it, and so when we look at it. When they have it, typically have done a find and replace
for the company name.
Yes. And that's about all they've modified the template for.
Sometimes they do a find and replace for like a CEO and replace it with president or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes they'll actually put the people in there. Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make here is that the template is written for a fictional company,
yes,
or the company that created it, and then based on themselves. And so that fictional company is doing certain things, and typically either they're not the things that you're doing, or they're very narrow and or in a perfect world kind of scenario of the way things are handled, and it's not the way you're doing it.
Exactly.
And so it's like you said, it's a great place to start and give you the bones. Like you ever hear someone, like bought a flipper house, house to flip. And
yes.
It's got good bones.
All right.
That's what a template is. It's got good bones, but you got to do the renovation.
It is.
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
the other thing is there are, and I'll just go ahead and name them, but there are companies that you can use for enclaves and stuff like that, or enclave type solutions. And Prevail is one of those. Prevail's got a good product, but they'll also give you templates. So you can buy this template policy package. I don't remember what they call it, but anyway, and you grab those templates. And it even tells you these templates are written with this fictional company in mind, and they tell you about this company and what it is, and then the understanding is you got to go through and make it match your company, because you're probably not the exact company that they listed out who this is written for. So stuff like that's great because for instance, Prevail, it'll be the documentation will be written for using Prevail in your instance if that's what you do. It's great and wonderful, but I can 1,000% tell you that those documents have to be customized for how you do things, because they don't address everything that needs to be addressed, and they can't address everything that you do the way you do it. So they have to be customized. You can't just take Prevail's documents and do a find and replace. I guess that's a good place to start on day one, but on day two, you've got to go a little further than that. So, but that there's all sorts of places you can get some really good documentation, but you've got to go the extra. I was going to say extra mile, but it's probably miles, multiple, to flesh out that documentation.
Yep. Yeah. The template will be a good place to start to shortcut a lot of hours of getting started. And then, you got the extra miles to go. So
absolutely.
Yep. Before we get into simplifying everything, can you help clear up the confusion and kind of frame us properly and explain what's actually required for CMMC Level 1 versus, say, CMMC Level 2?
Sure, yeah. So CMMC Level 1 is the Level 1 stuff, and Level 2 is the Level 2 stuff. So to take that a step further, CMMC Level 1 is the basic or the basic controls you need to implement to be able to handle FCI, Federal Contract Information. If you handle any CUI at all, you'll need to be Level 2. Level 2 self-assessed or Level 2 see-through PAOSS. So, but as far as Level 1 goes, 17 controls. They're relatively easy to implement. And you do have to have a policy. You don't necessarily have to have a giant policy stack, with tons of stuff, tons of plans, tons of procedures, everything else. It's not a bad idea to have in place, but you don't have to have that for Level 1. You can really generate that with one good policy that addresses all the controls, all the assessment objectives that are there, and get that done, and make sure you have those basic controls in place. They're pretty typical. So depending on how you do business, you might already have these implemented, or you might have most of them implemented. But you do have to document what you're doing, access control, visitor logs. You may not be doing visitor logs, for instance, but that's one of the things you have to do, for instance. But it's a lot shorter and simpler to implement. But you do have to have policies. You do have to write that stuff down and say this is what we do, and then you have to do it, and you have to. CMMC, even Level 1, is all about ongoing management and ongoing proof that you're doing what you say you're doing. So those visitor logs, those access control, all that kind of fun stuff, you have to keep that up. You can't just. It's not. None of this is a one and done.
Yeah, much more achievable. But there's you still have like a pretty decent liability and burden with CMMC Level 1, like you were mentioning. Most people. And including a lot of IT providers and compliance people just kind of skip past Level 1 and just like, that's easy. Just, do these things. You're good. But there's it's kind of a unvisited topic, really. And it's like to the point at which if you go read, I think it's I'm going to get it wrong if I talk about which document I'm referencing, but it tells you how you're supposed to do a self-attestment. And if you go read, you actually have to
Level 1 assessment guide.
Yeah, level 1 assessment guide. And I'm actually talking about, I think it's the 48 CFR. But in there, it says what you have to do for a self-attestment, and you have to retain all the evidence that you used for the self-attestment to prove it, right? And you have to, I think, retain it for 6 or 7 years or something like that. I can't remember what exactly it is. So go look it up. Don't trust my memory here. But the point is, most people just phone in level 1.
They do, yes.
It is much easier, but if you're going to attest to it, you have a burden of policy, of documentation, of evidence, and it's less focused on. But should anything ever happen, or the government come knocking, or anyone ever go look into it, and you attest at some point in time, and you don't have that evidence, and you hadn't done those things, and you don't have the policies and documentation, you hadn't followed it. If you do, you're still at a significant liability by having attested to something that you weren't in every truest sense doing, even
Right.
if you had antivirus and visitor logs. If you didn't do it the right way, that's a problem.
It is. And just to go back to that would be grounds for a False Claim Act there.
Mm-hmm.
And most of those False Claims Acts, just so everyone knows and remembers, are started by whistleblowers.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily a breach, but they're started by whistleblowers that says, hey, I tried to tell them,
Mm-hmm.
and they wouldn't listen to me, but these guys say they're doing all this and they're not. So that's whistleblowers that do that. So it may not be a breach happens, but it may be somebody that says, hey, we should be doing things right and we're not. And Uncle Sam, come check these guys out.
Yeah. Which could be a previous employee, a vendor,
Mm-hmm. Could be anybody.
A customer. Because in normal, daily business, these are kind of things that that people just kind of learn how you operate, and it is apparent, whether someone is or isn't following some rules, and some people may have more information or not. So I'm just trying to point out that those are kind of the exposure points that someone has for a False Claims Act, and who could be, a whistleblower, not making a judgment on whether that's good or bad. Just saying, if you're concerned about your liability, if you're trying to decide whether you should follow the rules properly, there is probably more exposure than you're thinking about.
Right.
If you don't,
Absolutely.
if you're testing something you're not doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you asked about the difference between level 1 and 2.
Yep.
So moving on to level 2, of course, there's 110 controls, and there's 320 assessment objectives. There's a requirement for a good bit of documentation there. Generally a good idea is to have your, policies for each of the 14 families. But you got to make sure all the 110 controls are covered. Really, you need to make sure the assessment objectives are covered through those policies and procedures and everything else that you have. You also have to have evidence of how you do things. So if you say that we have MFA implemented for computer logons, for our workstation logons, then you have to show the configuration of that, some screenshots of MFA coming up, that it actually happens, stuff like that. You have to have evidence that it's actually in place. Then when an assessor comes, they'll want to see it as well. But you have to have all that. You have to have I guess you don't have to, but you need a good way to store all that. You can absolutely store it in SharePoint or a file system or something like that. But as long as there's no CUI in it, but you need to think about that. Your documentation should not have any CUI in it. SPA, security protection data, SPD, I guess. So that would, you very well might have, you do have that in your I'd be very surprised if you didn't have some SPD in your SSP and your policies and stuff. So, but the storage of how you store all that, it can go in anything, right? As long as it meets the requirements that it needs to meet. But what I would say is really a GRC tool is the best place to put that. A GRC tool will help you organize everything. It'll keep everybody on the same page without 50 different versions of the same document floating around and wondering, is this version one really the real version one, or is did somebody say it with the right name? Who's the policy owner, and did somebody other than the policy owner save it? What did they anyway? So it gets confusing in a file system unless you're very structured in the way you do it and very strict about who can do what and all that kind of fun stuff. So. You certainly can do it in a file system, but a GRC tool is a very good thing to put in place and use. That, like I said, keeps everybody on the same versions, keeps everybody, it organizes everything very well. The one we use, Future Feed, it walks you through all sorts of stuff. It'll put you basically write out your SSP right there in Future Feed, and then you can generate that SSP from there as you're filling out the controls and the assessment objectives and whatnot. It'll show what proof is available to look at, of course. When you print out that SSP. Anyway, it's a system like that will help keep everything organized and together in one spot and everybody on the same page a lot better, a lot easier than a file system will. Now, is it more expensive than a file system? Yep. I mean, a file system is probably what you already have in place, so a GRC tool is going to cost you some money. Yeah. So is it worth it? We think it is. Other companies may or may not think it is, but a GRC tool really helps out as well. So
yeah, well, it really depends on, where you're putting your money and how you value certain different things in your resources. For us, we're a service provider. At the end of the day, however you look at it, our customers are basically paying for our labor. And so we have found that, typically we get a more affordable result for our customers if we use a GRC platform, because it does all the things you said it does, and it creates efficiency, and efficiency is created by spending money.
It is.
So it's, but for us, the ROI is there. Whether that applies to you internally, do a demo. You don't have to do Future Feed, but look at whatever is out there. I think there's free ones too.
There are. Yeah.
But it may be worth the extra investment of time and or money, because you might get some efficiencies that you buy there with one or the other. So
absolutely.
All right, getting into the nuts and bolts of documentation. If a small or mid-sized, say, machine shop or engineering firm or something like that wants to simplify their documentation, but without taking shortcuts or jeopardizing, passing an assessment, how would they make that happen?
Well, the way they make that happen really is, we've kind of mentioned it already, but consolidate everything you can. Take those policies and make one policy per family, right? One for access control, one for awareness and training, and so on and so forth, right? Make one policy per family. Go through and however you structure them, just you can put sections for each of the different controls and whatnot. Some of the controls are related. You can bundle them under one section or something, but just make sure all those are addressed in there, but consolidate from 50 policies down to 14 policies, I guess, or maybe a couple more than that, but as few policies as you can. Start off with the 14 families, and then whatever other policies you may need to finish addressing that. Finish addressing all the controls and everything, do that, but consolidate as much as you can into those policies, and realize that there's access control is a good one. It talks about, there's a assessment objective for, for user accounts, for devices, and for service accounts. And well, you can write that very easily, and it's, you can write all those objectives very easily and condense that down from the length that may be to write each one individually down into a shorter, simpler paragraph or something like that. So consolidate, any policies that might be related, but any policies you can. Certainly, one per family is a good way to go. That also keeps it understandable and relatable for the assessors. Because if you have policies all over the place, it's hard for them to follow. If they don't follow one for each of the families, is it even really covering everything? So they need to be written for CMMC to get the most out of it. I guess they don't necessarily have to be written for CMMC, but they do absolutely have to cover all the controls. So, because there may be multiple frameworks that you have to follow. And I'd say, your SSP, just remember that your SSP should tell a story of how you're doing everything. So for each of the controls, and I'd say each of the assessment objectives, if you're using a GRC tool, it's easy to put those assessment objectives in there, statements for assessment objectives, and have those be addressed in your SSP. But at the very least, make sure those in each of the controls, your statement addresses all of the assessment objectives. But in any case, that SSP needs to tell the story of how you're doing everything. You can put some details in there, but I would refrain from making your SSP 400 pages long. Mm-hmm. Some people do that, and if that's you and you like it and you think it works out great, more power to you. That's not the way I do it. That's not the way that I've talked to, plenty of assessors that I've talked to like to see the SSP tell the story and more of the detail of what exactly you do in the policies and then plans and procedures, of course. So
I like to tell our customers that we try and do the minimally sufficient amount to be compliant. Not to skirt anything,
no,
because it's optimal. Because if you go much beyond that, you're kind of given some rope to hang yourself with, and not in a necessarily a bad way. But if you're just if you go way too far into the weeds and everything else, you're providing a lot more things you have to do and prove and everything else. Whenever you just want to answer the question, be compliant, and that's it. If you're going to go the extra mile, say on your security logging or whatever else, that's great. But just do what's required in terms of compliance and everything else. So, like, for example, giving a real world example, we have a company that we're working with, and they're keeping all of their network to the level 2 standards. Now they've got an enclave that is going to be assessed, right, and so that is that's kind of the scope, what we've put out into the documentation and everything else, and they're going the extra mile on the rest of their network to keep it level 2 just to be secure,
right.
But we're not, we're limiting the scope to just the enclave where the CUI is, just because what is the point in getting the rest of the network assessed? There's not. It's just gonna make the burden of assessment much larger, and that's what I mean by that.
Yes, and think about your policies and what and your SSP as well. But what do you want to write in there, and what do you want to be held accountable for? If you keep most of your logs for a year, but some of them are only 90 days, for instance. You don't want to say, yes, we keep our logs. Our logs are have 1 year retention, blah, blah, blah. Because when the assessor comes to look and says, yeah, but this one is 90 days. And you're like, oh, yeah, accept that one, So, the way to write that is to say exactly what you do, or say our logs are kept for a minimum of 90 days. Mm-hmm. So just think about those things and write them appropriately to make sure you address those. And, just the facts, ma'am. The old, those of you that are old enough to remember Dragnet, the old TV show, but you're
What's
probably
that?
not. Yeah, exactly. So, they say just the facts, ma'am. Assessors, you give them just the facts, these policies and everything. You give them just what needs to be in there. You don't want to go on at length because, like you said, then you're holding yourself accountable to things you don't necessarily have to hold yourself accountable to. So, and I can't think of a good idea other than a good example other than logs right now, but
logs is an easy example.
Yeah, it's an easy one. So, but they should address everything you do, and you should write them in such a way that it gives you some room. Not that you want to write them overly broad. I'm not saying that, but just an example of the logs. So it meets the requirements. It meets what you're doing, and you can do more, but you've got to show that it's at least what you said. So if you do say, I've also had assessors say, if you do say the logs are kept for 90 days, and they say, for instance, because logs is the only example I can think of, if our logs are kept for 90 days, and they're looking and say they're kept for 120 days, this is wrong. So if you change that and say they're kept for, at least 90 days, then you're good. So
the way it's written is important.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then other thing I was going to say is a lot of assessors don't give out extra credit.
No, they don't give out extra credit.
Remember, it's a pass fail.
Yes, absolutely. The other note I have down here to remember is that stop creating multiple layers of documents, right? Mm-hmm. And that just goes back to everything we were just saying. Mm-hmm. You need your SSP, you need your policies. Some of those plans and procedures are required. Make sure you get all those in, and just keep those as succinct as possible. They're going to they're always longer than I like them to be, because I want it to be bulleted really short and be like half a page. That's not possible, but that's what I would like. But those policies need to be nice and succinct, to the point, but still cover everything. And then, of course, you're going to have all your all your supporting documentation, your screenshots of everything you're doing, how your things are configured, everything else that you're going to have. GRC tool is a great place to keep all that stuff, because you can attach it right to those controls, or you can put it in there and attach it to multiple controls if you need to, and that will happen. And it's hard necessarily to attach it to multiple controls in a filing system, in a file system. You can create links and all sorts of fun stuff, but it's, in my mind, it's easier to do in a GRC tool.
So when it comes to getting assessed, what do assessors actually care about most when it comes to documentation?
They care that your SSP is well defined, that it lays out, like I said, a story of how you're protecting everything, how you're fulfilling those controls. They care about that. They care about your policies mapping to NIST 800-171 controls, and that they show further what you're doing, define what you're doing. They also care about evidence. Hopefully you've got some evidence for them to look at already. Hopefully you've produced all that. And when you provide them documentation before they come out, they can look through it and they can go, wow, these folks are really put together. And, and they can come out and say, all right, show us your password policy. And you can pull up that password policy, show them. Okay, good. If you stumble around and can't figure out where it's at, or, you have to say, don't look. Let me change something real quick. Maybe that's maybe that's a problem. But they care that you can produce that proof and those logs and everything. They care that you can produce that quickly and efficiently. And that you have something already implemented and you're not having to play catch up or anything. So those are the kind of things they care about. And like I say, if you have all your documentation, you have your SSP, your policies, your procedures, and your plans, and then they're all of course mapped to NIST 800-171 controls and CMMC. And then you provide all that evidence. Your assessment is going to go a lot quicker if you've got all that taken care of. You've got all that evidence already. It's already uploaded to wherever it goes, file system or a GRC tool. When you provide them all the documentation that they request, and they see all that, that should hopefully make your assessment go a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. Won't be any cheaper, just so you know, but it'll make it go quicker.
Well, it'll be cheaper in the fact that you won't have to redo it.
Well, yes, that's true. It will be cheaper because of that. Yes.
Yeah. So, have you ever seen Wolf of Wall Street?
Yes.
Okay. It is not the most PC movie, but it's
no, not really.
No, it's one of my favorite movies just because it's I don't know, it's so well done and it's over the top and everything. But anyway, and Leonardo DiCaprio, is a really good actor in it. Anyway, there's a scene in there where they're getting audited by, I think it's the SEC or something, one of the money auditors. And what they do is they are just putting roadblocks after roadblocks for the auditors. And at one point they bring him into the office and like, yeah, can I do anything for you? And then they stick him in this conference room that's like turned down to like 55 degrees and freeze him out. And they're in there shivering, and they just bring boxes and boxes of bank, those bank boxes of paper, and just stack them up in front of them and slam the door and walk out right after they're done being nice to him. And I just thought that was hilarious, but that's not what you want to do with your assessors.
No, you do that to an assessor, and you very well may fail. In fact, I would be surprised if you didn't.
Right. You want to do the opposite, actually. So it's a funny scene.
Yeah.
But really, to make your assessment go well, you really kind of want to lay out the red carpet for them. You want to make their job easy. You want to have an answer to every question. Be able to pull up. Have everything at the ready. Be able to pull up things when they ask for them, like you said, very easily. So you kind of want to do the opposite of that.
So when you say roll out the red carpet, you're talking about having like coffee and kolaches and mimosas and special gifts for them or something?
You take that however you want to. I'm not.
Coffee and kolaches are probably okay. The rest of the stuff is probably not. But really, you're talking about roll out the red carpet, make it easy for them, and provide everything they need, all the documentation, everything. Yep. Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. Let's take it from the other side. What happens when a company oversimplifies and removes too much?
Well, that's a problem too. If you oversimplify, you do need to be, you should be concise, and you should be, keep everything as anyway, it's concise. I was going to say short, but just as concise as possible. You want everything to be in there. You want it to be accurate. You want the whole picture laid out for the assessor. But don't go on. Don't have a 400-page SSP. But again, some of you may like a 400-page SSP, and hey, that's fine. But point is, don't go on ad nauseum, but don't way oversimplify either. If you say, we patch monthly, and then you don't define how you do it, and you're like, well, Windows, we just let Windows run, and how do you verify that? What do you do to verify those patches went out? What do you do to verify that Windows Update's really running? All that kind of fun stuff. So, are you actually doing it? So letting Windows do it for you and not writing it down and explaining what you do and what you do to monitor and all that, that's where the problem comes in. So, we talk to a lot of IT guys I'm an IT guy too, so I'm guilty. But we talk to a lot of IT guys, and we say, how often do you patch? We patch monthly. The week after Patch Tuesday, for instance, for Microsoft, because rarely do you want to patch everything the day the patches come out. You want to have your pilot group patch those. Cross your fingers. If everything's good, a week later you patch everything else.
You're not telling me Microsoft makes mistakes.
Never. Okay. They're definitely not on the just get it out right now and we'll fix the problems later bandwagon. Just kidding, they are. I think every software vendor is there. But anyway, so that's an example on the patching. You need to define what you do. You need to make sure you address all the controls. You need to make sure it's monitored. You need to explain how all that's done. I know the IT guys, IT guy always says, yeah, we're patching monthly, Okay, well, how you doing that? Oh, this is Windows automatic update. All right, well, where does it say that? What do you mean? It just happens, Well, that's great. Well, how do you monitor it? I have to monitor it. So anyway, so yes, make sure that you don't way oversimplify it and leave out crucial details.
There needs to be a verifiable process.
Exactly. Another one is incident response policies, policy plan and procedure. What does your incident response look like? Do you have a policy? Do you actually do what that policy says? Have you ever looked at the policy beyond the time that you initially created it? Ideally, that incident response policy, well, not just ideally, but, because you're supposed to test it. Hopefully it's been tested and you actually go through it and fix things that aren't right or that you need to expand on or cut out or whatever every time you test that incident response policy, because every incident response policy is made to be changed, believe me. So a lot of people just write their incident response policy and don't ever do anything else with it. And it doesn't really address what they do, and if God forbid they have an incident, they forget, that there is an incident response policy.
So there's only 3 truths in the world, and that's death, taxes, and that your incident response policy will change.
That's right. Another thing that gets people is your inventory, right? Your inventory of just take devices, for instance, I've got an inventory of devices. It's in Active Directory, That's overly simplified. That is not what your inventory is supposed to be. It doesn't come from. It can come partly from Active Directory, but what else is on your network? How do you verify that? How is it authorized? So all that is in there. You can't just say, yeah, it's in Active Directory or Intune or whatever it may be. You've got to verify what's in there, what's not. Everything's got to be on that inventory sheet. So that's another big one that catches people that, us IT guys go, yeah, I got a inventory is right in Active Directory. I can write a PowerShell script and it'll pop it right out. Mm-hmm. If ThreatLocker doesn't block the PowerShell script.
Feel like we're on the path of Little Red Riding Hood. One's a little too hot, one's a little too cold, a little too much simplification, not enough.
Get that P's and P's just right.
All right. So what is just right, for a small, like mid-sized aerospace contractor, machine shop or something like that? What does, that porridge just right look right in terms of documentation? Your documentation porridge.
Right. So really what this looks like, is what we've already talked about a lot, making sure that those policies are concise, making sure that they're, but everything is addressed, right? And make sure that you have all that documentation, everything we've already talked about. But the other part of this is management, and ongoing monitoring, this is CMMC and NIST 171 are all about ongoing management and making sure that this is, you do the care and feeding of the program, right? It's not a set it and forget it, Wish it was, but it's not. And really, we've talked about this in other podcasts. People like to think that IT is set it and forget it. And although you can automate a lot of stuff, you can automate all those updates, you can automate your backups, it is not set it and forget it. You hope, you cross your fingers that you set it and can forget it and you can trust, but you also need to verify, right?
Yep.
You can trust but verify, right? So you got to go back as a managed service provider. It's great that we have all those automated things for backups and testing the recovery and all that kind of fun stuff. But we also go in there and check that, make sure that we actually can recover. We got to do some test recoveries, make sure that happens for patching. We've got to monitor that and make sure it actually happens, make sure that those Windows machines upgrade, Windows 11 upgrades past 24H2, for instance. And some of you may have no clue what that means, but some of you may. But you've got to, all those things are automated and supposed to happen, but you've got to verify that they happen. You've got to manage those things. So having quarterly rolling reviews, not annual chaos. So you identify all the things that you need to be keeping track of, and you have some quarterly reviews of those things. It may be for your visitor log. It may be that you want to do that weekly or monthly, for instance, but do things at least on a quarterly basis. Some things will need to be more than that. Set up your GRC tool. If you use a GRC tool, probably has a function in it for recurring tasks or reminders or something like that. Utilize that to help you out. Assign real owners that take care of these things, right? It doesn't need to be all on one person, although if you're a really small shop, it's going to be all on one person. And yes, it's a lot of work. But assign somebody to take care of it. So it's in their wheelhouse. They have to get it done. It's their responsibility, right? Responsibility and accountability can be different people. You think about the RACI model: responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, right? So some of those GRC tools use that model to assign things to people. Use version control on the tools that you have. Again, if you're using a filing system or, if you're using a file system, that's very important to make sure that you rigidly stick to that version control, right? If you use a GRC tool, some of that's automated for you. So, it is automated for you, but I guess on all those GRC tools I've seen are that's kind of automated. But anyway, they have a version control to help you out, and they'll show history and all that kind of fun stuff. So, but make sure that you use version control. If you're, again, I'll go back to make sure that you, if you can, spend the money to get a GRC tool. They go everywhere from free to not costing very much to being pretty expensive. So look at a few and figure out what you want, what'll fit the bill for you. Ask us if you want to. I can already tell you we'll recommend FutureFeed if you just need CMMC compliance and there's not other frameworks. But if you use a GRC tool, make sure you get that evidence in there and make sure you link it to the right controls, or the right assessment objectives, whatever it may be. Actually, on the assessment objectives, FutureFeed, I think it's the controls you map it to. But in any case, it's one of those things where in a GRC tool, you can usually map that piece of evidence to multiple places, because sometimes that helps, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't use a GRC tool, I've said GRC about 100 times through this podcast, so I should probably define it in case this may be your first time out of the box learning about all this. GRC means governance, risk, and compliance. So it's just a tool to manage all that. So
all your governance,
your risk, all your risk,
and your compliance,
and all your compliance. Yes. So if you don't have a GRC tool and you're doing it old school on file system, build yourself a matrix of your evidence and what controls map to which evidence. It's good for the assessors if you put links in there, or at least if not a link, put a file path, relative to where it's stored at, so they can find that stuff easily. Because at some point, you're going to package all that stuff up and give it to them, right? So
again, this is going back to the red carpet.
This is going back to the red carpet. Yeah. Yes, you want to make it easy for them. You don't want to make it hard. So, treat them well. Give them all the information they need, and as long as you actually do cover all the controls you're supposed to cover, then you'll pass. And it'll go. If you have all that documentation laid out, all your evidence in there, should go quicker than not. And I've had some assessors tell me that they get the documentation and have their meeting with the people that they need to meet with on site, some remote or whatever needs to happen, and the next day they issue a certification. So, or tell them that they're certified and go through that process, I guess. But anyway, so it can go very quickly if you've got everything ready.
So, if you could sum it all up together for us, for the viewers back at home, for contractors, manufacturers, machine shops, engineering firms out there that currently feel buried in documentation and don't know where to start.
Sure. So, you don't need more and more and more documents, although even if you're keeping things concise and just as short as possible, it will feel like that. If this is not your daily gig, that compliance is not your daily gig, it's going to feel like you're drowning in documents regardless. But like I said, be concise, have just the amount of documents you need. Don't go any more overboard than you need to. I would argue that CMMC is overboard on documentation, but it's everything that's needed to prove all this, and that's what it's all about. So, but make sure you have the right documentation. Make sure you keep it as simplistic. I don't like that word necessarily. You've heard me say concise. I like that word. So
sounds more elegant.
It sounds more elegant. It sounds more something. I don't really know. But you've got to make sure you've addressed everything in there, but keep it as short, as concise as possible, while making sure that the auditors understand. A third party can come and read that and understand, and it doesn't go on where it doesn't need to go on, or drag on where it doesn't need to drag on. So, if your policies and SSP and everything else match your environment, match everything you're doing, then that's going to make a happy assessor. That's also going to make a happy you, because that'll mean that you pass. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Brooke. As always, appreciate your insight and your time with us here today. If you haven't noticed, my get up, my outfit here today, Texas chic, holiday clothing.
Right.
I've got my largemouth bass with a Santa hat, and
I did not get the Christmas shirt memo for some reason. Yeah. So, Well, it is what it is, I guess.
You must have missed it. It's must got caught in the spam filter.
So you probably won't be seeing this before Christmas, but if you see this after Christmas, that's why. It's Christmas is coming up. So
we're recording this though the week before Christmas.
Yes.
So this will probably come out first week of January. I think just right after Christmas.
See, we should have thought about that. You should have worn a Christmas shirt back in November.
I know. I should have thought about it. So they didn't have them on the shelves yet.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
That's my excuse. So, but thank you guys. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah. Merry Festivus for the rest of us. All the fun stuff from the CMMC Compliance Guide team. We appreciate you guys. If you have questions about what we covered, please reach out to us. We're here to help fast track your compliance journey. Text, email, or call in your questions. We'll answer them for free here on the podcast.
And if you have any questions about Austin's Christmas shirt, he can tell you where to get it.
Absolutely. And tell you what, it's Magellan at Academy. It's only during Christmas time. So you can find our contact information at cmmccomplianceguide.com. Please stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay compliant, stay secure, and make sure to subscribe.